names keep getting pulled into the Diddy scandal. Jay-Z, Beyoncé, Cardi B, Kid Cudi, even 50 Cent. But here's the thing. Mention does not equal liability. So tonight, we're running the receipts-only scorecard. Who's really exposed? Who's just trending for clicks? And which names are totally safe despite the headlines? And stick with me, but because by the end, you'll know why judges and prosecutors draw a hard legal line between PR proximity and actual exposure. Welcome back to Celeb Courtroom Chaos, where the tea is hot, the rumors are wild, and the legal analysis cuts through the noise. When the Diddy fallout started, it felt like half of Hollywood was suddenly in the conversation. Every new filing or witness statement dragged more names into the headlines. But here's the truth. Just because someone's name pops up in a civil lawsuit, a deposition, or a media report doesn't mean they're legally in trouble. So tonight, we're breaking down the real scorecard, one by one. Jay-Z, Beyoncé, Cardi B, Kid Cudi, 50 Cent, and Cassie. We'll separate the actual court documents from the rumor mill, and by the end, you'll know who's really at risk and who isn't even in the same courtroom. All right, let's dive in. Legal tea first, drama second. When it comes to the Diddy fallout, no name gets dragged into the mix faster than Jay-Z. If Diddy's trending, Jay's shadow is right there, because the internet loves a two moguls, one scandal headline. But let's separate clickbait from case files. Legally, Jay-Z is sitting pretty. Here's why. The only real brush Jay had with anything lawsuit-adjacent tied to Diddy goes all the way back to the early 2000s. A civil case named him, but it was dismissed with prejudice. And in lawyer speak, that's the good stuff. It's not, we'll revisit this later. It's the judge saying, this case is dead. Don't even think about digging it up again. That's permanent legal closure. Fast forward to the more recent Star Island lawsuit. His name, and Beyoncé's, popped up in the filings like an Easter egg planted for headlines. But here's the trick. They were dropped almost instantly. The plaintiffs yanked them out before the ink was even dry. Why? Because there was no evidence, no standing, no legal meat behind the name drop. Lawyers have a term for this. Kitchen sink pleading. You throw in every famous name you can, hoping one sticks long enough to get you press. Judges despise it, and the dismissal was swift. Now here's where it gets juicy. While his name was being tossed around online, Jay himself said, absolutely nothing. Not a press statement, not a denial, not even a sly line in a verse. Total silence. And that silence is calculated. Jay learned long ago that in scandals, words can be twisted. Silence ages well. Look at the track record. This is the same guy who turned his own cheating scandal into 444, a Grammy-winning confessional album, without ever once groveling in the tabloids. He knows how to take heat and flip it into narrative control. So, when it comes to the Diddy mess, Jay doesn't need to fight in the court of public opinion. The legal documents already fought and cleared him. That's why his risk level is low, not charged, not a defendant, not even in the maybe column. But here's the twist. Because of his proximity to Diddy, the collabs, the business ties, the shared mogul image, Jay will always be PR adjacent. And that's the irony. The bigger your brand, the more you get dragged into headlines for someone else's scandal. So on the Spillover map, Jay-Z is a textbook case of hot in the headlines, ice cold in the filings. And if Jay's risk is this low, imagine how fast Beyoncé cut herself free. Spoiler, blink and you missed it. If Jay-Z's name in the Diddy fallout raised eyebrows, Beyoncé's mention was a full-blown gaslight, gatekeep, clickbait moment. Here's what really happened. In that Star Island lawsuit, her name appeared for about 5 minutes, just long enough for TMZ to push a headline and Twitter to explode. And then, gone. Dropped almost immediately, like it was never there. That's because Beyoncé was the definition of a headline defendant. Lawyers sometimes throw in a megastar's name, not because there's evidence, but because it guarantees attention. Judges call this improper joinder. Basically, dragging someone into your drama just to boost your case's visibility. And the court system does not play with that. The judge slashed her name out of the filing like trimming fat off a steak. So legally, Beyoncé's exposure is non-existent. No evidence, no standing, no claim. If lawsuits were a concert, she wasn't even on the lineup. Her name was just printed on the flyer to sell tickets. But here's the PR side. Even that split-second mention was enough to fuel days of gossip. Think about it. Beyoncé doesn't need to be guilty of anything to trend. All she has to do is be in proximity to a scandal, and suddenly her name is ricocheting around the internet. That's the curse of being Beyoncé. The brand is so massive, even a baseless filing can spark a firestorm. Now, notice how she handled it. Like Jay, she said nothing, no denials, no Instagram rants, no lawyer statements. Silence. And that silence is strategic. When you're Beyoncé, you don't dignify random filings with a response. You let the legal system cut your name out, and you stay above the noise. It's a masterclass in PR judo, turning the attack back on itself by ignoring it completely. So, on the scorecard, Beyoncé is risk equals low. Legally, she was never in the building. PR-wise, her name will keep popping up because she's Beyoncé. But that's not liability. That's just brand gravity. And if Beyoncé got pulled in for pure name value, Cardi B's headlines were even more textbook. A perfect case of PR adjacency masquerading as legal exposure. Cardi B's name in the Diddy fallout is the perfect example of how PR adjacency can turn into fake legal smoke. Here's the reality. Go to the filings and you'll see nothing. Cardi isn't a defendant. She's not a witness. She's not accused of anything. But open Twitter or scroll a blog, and suddenly you'll see Cardi linked to Diddy scandal headlines. Why? Because in the celebrity gossip ecosystem, her name guarantees clicks. So how does this happen? A filing will mention an event, maybe a party, maybe a business deal, and someone connects dots that don't exist. Suddenly, Cardi's name is being dragged in not because of law, but because of optics. She's outspoken, she's flashy, she's polarizing. And that makes her the perfect insert star here character in someone else's scandal. Now, here's where it gets interesting for viewers. Cardi actually knows the power of PR adjacency because she's weaponized it herself. Remember, she's been in court before. Her own strip club assault case in New York ended with her pleading guilty and doing community service. She knows how headlines twist when her name gets attached to legal drama. So, when she got pulled into the Diddy orbit, she did what seasoned celebs do. Ignored it. No denials, no angry rants, just let the noise die. Legally, her risk equals low. She's not in the paperwork, she's not on the docket. It's gossip smoke without legal fire. But here's the kicker. Even with zero exposure, Cardi's name stayed in circulation longer than it should have. Why? Because controversy sticks better when you're already a lightning rod. Cardi is one of those celebs whose brand thrives on confrontation, so when people see her name near the word scandal, they're quicker to believe it than they would for, say, Taylor Swift. That's the dark side of image. So Cardi's case teaches us something important. Sometimes the courtroom battle isn't between lawyers, it's between PR narrative and receipts. And on the receipts scorecard, she's clear. Now, if Cardi was dragged in by gossip, Kid Cudi's role is different. His name actually appears in testimony, and that changes the whole dynamic. Now here's where the spillover map stops being about gossip adjacency and starts touching courtroom air. Kid Cudi. Unlike Jay-Z, Beyoncé, or Cardi, Cudi's name doesn't just float around on social media. It shows up in testimony. His story, straight out of a legal drama script. Here's the headline moment. Cudi testified that after his friendship with Diddy soured, his car mysteriously blew up in his driveway. Not a fender bender, not vandalism, an explosion. And prosecutors were quick to connect dots, painting it as part of a broader pattern of intimidation. Think about how that lands in a courtroom. You've got federal prosecutors telling the judge, this isn't just about wealth and partying. This is about retaliation, control, and silencing people. And then you drop a celebrity like Kid Cudi into the mix with a story that sounds like Goodfellas. Hip-hop edition. That's courtroom gold. Now, legally, does that make Kid Cudi a target? Number. He's not charged, not a defendant, not even remotely on the hook. If anything, it makes him valuable to the prosecution as a witness. But here's where it gets complicated. Being a witness comes with its own risks. Witnesses get pulled apart in court. They're cross-examined, their credibility is tested, their past is combed through. Prosecutors may like your testimony, but defense attorneys will do everything they can to poke holes in it. If you're Kid Cudi, that means being dragged into the legal spotlight whether you like it or not. And then there's the PR risk. Once his testimony hit the headlines, it wasn't just about being a victim. Suddenly, blogs were speculating about his relationship with Diddy, about behind-the-scenes beefs, about what really happened. Cudi's carefully built image as the introspective, artsy outsider got splashed with tabloid gasoline. That's why his risk level is low-medium. Legally, he's safe. No charges, no liability. But the exposure, It's real. His name is in transcripts, his quotes are in headlines, and his story is now part of the prosecution's narrative. And here's the deeper layer. If the trial moves forward, Cudi could be called to testify again. And testimony is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it boosts the case against Diddy. On the other, it keeps Cudi's name tied to this scandal for months, maybe years. Remember how long R. Kelly's witnesses stayed in the spotlight? Or how Amber Heard's friends were dragged across media for months during the Depp trial? Being a witness can feel like being on trial yourself. And Kid Cudi's story, a car blowing up, is so cinematic, the media will never let it go. So while his legal risk is basically zero, his PR exposure is very real. And unlike Beyoncé or Cardi, he can't shrug it off with silence, because his words are already locked into official transcripts. That's why Kid Cudi is the wild card on this spillover map, safe legally, but entangled enough that his reputation will keep taking hits every time this case is mentioned. And speaking of reputations, one man has built his entire brand on trolling scandals from the sidelines. You know who I'm talking about. 50 Cent. All right, let's talk about the loudest voice in the room. 50 Cent. While most celebs are running away from the Diddy fallout, 50 has been sprinting toward it with a megaphone. He's posted memes, cracked jokes, hinted about dropping a documentary, and even stirred up chatter about presidential pardons. Yes, presidential pardons. Only 50 could take a federal case and remix it into a comedy special. But here's the legal tea. Commentary is not liability. 50 is not named in any filings. He's not a defendant. He's not a witness. He's not even mentioned in passing in the court documents. He's simply a spectator with a very loud voice. So legally, risk equals low, zero exposure. But here's where it gets spicy. PR-wise, 50 knows exactly what he's doing. He's weaponized other people's scandals for years. Remember Ja Rule? 50 didn't just beef with him. He literally bought out 200 front-row tickets to Ja's concert just to leave the seats empty. Or Rick Ross. He turned their feud into a full-on meme war. Now, with Diddy's case, 50 sees opportunity. While everyone else is ducking for cover, he's leaning in. That's why he teased his own Surviving Diddy documentary, a riff on the Surviving R. Kelly series that tanked R. Kelly's reputation. 50's playbook is simple. When the culture is obsessed with a scandal, he monetizes the memes. But here's the catch. When you insert yourself this loudly, your name gets glued to the story even if you're not legally involved. Type Diddy scandal into Twitter right now, and you'll see 50 Cent's posts floating right alongside the actual court updates. That's PR adjacency by choice. And this is where it gets risky. Not in court, but in branding. Because when you troll this hard, you're betting that public opinion will stay on your side. If any unexpected receipts were ever to connect you, even distantly, the backlash would be nuclear. 50 thrives on dancing at the edge of scandals, but it's still a dance on thin ice. So, while his legal risk is basically zero, his PR exposure is sky high, because he made it that way. Unlike Cardi or Beyoncé, who got pulled into headlines unwillingly, 50 volunteered to sit at the center of this storm. That's why on the Spillover scorecard, 50 Cent is unique. He's the only one on this list whose risk is low by law but high by design. He's not fighting spillover, he's fueling it. And speaking of fueling scandals, the one name that lit the match for all of this is Cassie, and her situation is a completely different category altogether. If 50 Cent is the loudest voice in the fallout, Cassie is the quiet spark that lit the fire. Because let's be real, without Cassie's civil lawsuit in late 2023, this entire Diddy saga might never have escalated the way it has. Her case cracked open the door, and once it was open, everything else started pouring through. Here's the breakdown. Cassie filed a civil lawsuit accusing Diddy of years of abuse, coercion, and violence. The lawsuit wasn't just sensational in its claims, it was devastatingly detailed. Timelines, patterns, specific incidents, the kind of stuff that made headlines impossible to ignore. And then, just as quickly as it landed, it settled. Within 24 hours. That's lightning speed in legal time. Settlements like that don't happen unless the defendant is desperate to make the case disappear. For Cassie, it meant closure and stepping out of the legal spotlight. For Diddy, it meant the opposite. Suddenly, the public was asking, what was so urgent that you needed this gone in a day? Now, let's be clear. Cassie is not a defendant. She's not at risk of charges. She's not part of the criminal case that followed. Her civil claims ended with that settlement. So, on the scorecard, her risk is marked NA. Different category altogether. But here's where Cassie's role is bigger than any legal rating. Her lawsuit unleashed a cultural ripple effect. After she spoke up, more women came forward. Media outlets started digging deeper into Diddy's history. Prosecutors, who might have kept things quiet, suddenly had a chorus of new voices to look at. And then there's the PR side. Cassie's silence after the settlement was strategic. She didn't run victory laps. She didn't drop tell-all interviews. Her only public move, a brief statement about healing little by little. That restraint actually amplified her credibility. While Diddy's team was scrambling with denials, Cassie stepped back and let the weight of her claims speak for themselves. Here's the irony. Cassie isn't even in the courtroom anymore, but she's the name most people connect to this entire fallout. She's the emotional anchor of the story. Even Kid Cudi's explosive testimony, even 50 Cent's trolling, all of it flows back to her filing that first case. So yes, her risk level is N/A, but her impact? Off the charts. Without Cassie, there's no spillover map. Without Cassie, Jay-Z and Beyoncé don't get name-dropped. Without Cassie, Kid Cudi isn't reliving a car explosion in testimony. Cassie may have stepped out of the legal spotlight, but make no mistake, she lit the match and the fire is still burning. So after all the headlines, the filings, and the name drops, here's the truth about the Diddy fallout spillover. There's a massive difference between trending and truly exposed. Jay-Z? Headlines love him, but the filings don't. His only brush with this was dismissed with prejudice years ago, and the Star Island suit dropped him instantly. Risk equals low. Beyoncé? Same deal. Improper joinder gone before the ink was dry. Risk equals low. Cardi B? PR adjacency at best. Not in the paperwork, not in the courtroom. Risk equals low. Kid Cudi? Now that's different. He's not a defendant, but his car explosion testimony locked his name into the official record. That's spotlight, not liability. Risk equals low to medium. 50 Cent? The ultimate troll. Legally untouchable, but he's made himself part of the story by choice. His brand thrives on spillover, even when the risk is zero. Risk equals low, PR equals high. And Cassie, she's not at risk at all. She's the accuser who settled her civil suit, but her lawsuit is the domino that set everything in motion. Risk equals N/A, impact equals huge. And that's the map. Everyone else? Just background chatter. Because unless your name is on an indictment or a judge's docket, you're not in the case. This is where law and PR split into two different realities. The legal threshold is evidence, charges, and court filings. The PR threshold is proximity, gossip, and clickbait value. One ruins your career in headlines, the other ruins your life in court. So the next time you see a big name trending next to Diddy, remember the spillover map. Ask yourself, is this receipts or is this just PR smoke? So that's the spillover map. Names in the headlines, but not in the indictments. And here's the real takeaway. This isn't the last time we'll see spillover like this. Big scandals always drag innocent names into the storm. Remember how half of Hollywood got linked to Epstein just because they'd been in a photo? Or how the Depp Heard trial turned every friend, every assistant, every text message into a subplot? That's what happens when PR spillover collides with courtroom reality. So the question isn't just who's at risk now, it's who gets pulled in next. Because as this case builds, you can bet more names will trend whether they belong in the filings or not. And that's where I'll leave it to you. When a celebrity's name pops up in a scandal like this, do you take it seriously right away? Or do you wait for the receipts before you judge? Drop your verdict in the comments. And if you love your gossip with a side of subpoenas, hit that subscribe button. Because trust me, the Diddy fallout isn't over, and the spillover list, it's only going to get longer.